Millionaire CEO fell for a poor girl selling handmade jewelry. The twist will melt your heart. The Chicago wind howls. Glass crashes. Flowers scatter across the icy sidewalk. Sound of tires screeching. Chloe drops to her knees, her trembling fingers brushing the broken petals as the cold air cuts her cheeks. Her flower stand lies shattered in front of her. A sleek black Bentley sits inches away. The door opens. Maxwell Sterling steps out. Tall, commanding, flawless in his tailored suit. Chloe said, "You know, not all of us can afford to crush people and just pay them off." Maxwell said, "It was an accident. I'll compensate you." Chloe said louder, "Your money can't unbreak what you destroy." The crowd gathers. Phones record. The CEO, frozen for once. He ruled billions, she sold flowers on the sidewalk. But when their worlds collided, neither was ready for what came next. The cold Chicago wind sliced between the towering skyscrapers like glass blades. It was the kind of winter that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. People rushed past, heads down, bundled in scarves and coats, never looking at each other. Except for her. Chloe Ramirez knelt beside her tiny flower cart, carefully arranging fresh lilies in mason jars she'd painted by hand. The delicate blooms added a splash of color against the gray steel of the city. Her hands were numb, but she smiled as an elderly woman approached. "Morning, Mrs. Lewis," Chloe greeted softly, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Your usual bouquet?" The old woman nodded, her face wrinkled but warm. Chloe quickly wrapped a small bundle of daisies and baby's breath tied with a ribbon. "Thank you, dear. You're always out here, no matter the weather." Chloe smiled faintly, but behind her polite nod lived exhaustion. She'd already worked an overnight shift cleaning offices before setting up her stand. But Nathan needed his medication, and the hospital bills didn't wait. She slipped the cash into a small metal box beneath the cart. Every dollar mattered. Then, without warning, the roar of an engine echoed through the narrow street. Chloe barely had time to turn before a sleek black Bentley surged forward, its tires skidding on the icy pavement. The car spun slightly, its front bumper colliding with the edge of her cart. The world froze for a moment. Glass shattered, flowers tumbled across the concrete, the metal frame of the cart twisted like paper. Chloe stumbled backward, her heart pounding as petals floated around her like confetti. The car door swung open with a gentle mechanical hiss. Out stepped a man who seemed untouched by the cold. Maxwell Sterling, 34, billionaire, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, the man who controlled half the real estate in downtown Chicago. Impeccable in a black cashmere coat, gloves, and a watch worth more than Chloe's yearly income. His steel-gray eyes narrowed slightly as he surveyed the damage. The small crowd that had gathered whispered and pointed, some pulling out their phones to film. Maxwell's voice was calm, distant. "Are you hurt?" Chloe's chest heaved, trying to steady her breath. The sting of humiliation burned her face hotter than the cold. "I'm fine," she bit out, her voice sharp. He stepped closer as if studying her for the first time. Her cheap jacket, her worn gloves, her chapped lips. And those eyes. Fierce and unyielding. "I'll have my office compensate you for the damage." Chloe let out a short, humorless laugh that caught even herself by surprise. "Of course you will." The words dripped with sarcasm, slicing through the icy air. Maxwell arched an eyebrow. "I don't see the need for hostility. It was an accident." "Accident?" Chloe's voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "You crushed my entire stand. My entire business." He glanced at the cart as if seeing it for the first time. To him, it was probably nothing more than a few dollars of broken glass. But to Chloe, it was months of scraped-together savings, hours of sleepless nights arranging every bouquet. "You want to fix it? Then fix this," she gestured to the mess on the ground, her voice cracking. "But don't think your money makes it okay." The words hung in the air, heavier than the snowflakes starting to fall. The crowd murmured, shifting closer. Someone whispered, "That's Maxwell Sterling." Maxwell glanced at the phones recording him. His assistant Jennifer hovered nervously behind him, unsure whether to step in. Then for the first time in years, Maxwell felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not annoyance, but discomfort, a sensation of losing control. He looked back at the young woman, still kneeling beside her crushed flowers, fighting tears but refusing to cry. And for a moment longer than he should have, he stared. Not at her cheap gloves, not at her ruined stand, but at her. There was something in her defiance, in the way she refused to be small, even while kneeling, in the way her voice shook but did not break. Jennifer leaned in, whispering urgently, "Mr. Sterling, we should go." But Maxwell didn't move, his voice lowered. "What's your name?" The question caught Chloe off guard. Her lips parted, unsure how to respond. "Why do you care?" "Because you're the first person in a very long time to speak to me like that." She blinked, chest tightening. Was he mocking her? "Chloe," she finally said. "Chloe Ramirez." Maxwell nodded slowly, as if filing the name away. "Well, Miss Ramirez," he said, voice softer, "allow me to properly apologize." And with that, he reached into his coat and handed her a black card, one of those rare, limitless cards the ultra-rich carried like armor. But Chloe didn't take it. Instead, she stood up, brushed the broken glass from her knees, and looked him dead in the eye. "I don't want your money," she said softly, voice cracking but firm. "I want my life back." The wind howled around them, the world seemed to pause. And that's when something shifted inside Maxwell Sterling. Something that would change both of their lives forever. He thought money could solve anything. But when he met her, he discovered the one thing he couldn't buy was love. Chapter 1. The Collision. The world has a way of forcing people into places they don't belong. That morning, Chloe Ramirez woke before the city stirred. Her alarm clock didn't buzz, it was broken. But the weight in her chest always woke her before sunrise. Nathan's breathing was steady from the other side of their tiny apartment. She pulled her worn coat tight and tiptoed around piles of medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter. The hospital wanted money, the landlord wanted money, even the electricity seemed to hum with quiet threats. But out there, in the cold streets of Chicago, she could fight for at least a little of it, enough to make it through another week. Meanwhile, 2 miles away, the glass towers of Sterling Enterprises gleamed in the pale winter light. Inside the executive suite, Maxwell Sterling barely glanced at the clock. Another day, another meeting, another set of numbers designed to distract him from the hollow that had been growing inside for years. His assistant Jennifer entered, balancing her tablet. Board meeting moved to 11. Lunch with the Japanese investors canceled. Your father left another message. Maxwell didn't even blink. Delete it. Jennifer hesitated but nodded. He adjusted his cufflinks, staring at his reflection in the towering window. Chicago stretched endlessly below, a city he technically owned pieces of but had never truly belonged to. By 9:30, Chloe's flower cart was set up. It wasn't much, a repurposed push cart with chipped paint and mason jars filled with fresh arrangements she'd stayed up making. Each bouquet was hand-tied with a little note, a small piece of spring, even in winter. She smiled at an elderly man who always bought a single white lily for his late wife. "You're a blessing, young lady," he whispered with a shaky smile. Chloe nodded softly. She never told customers how close to collapse she really was. And then, everything shattered. The sound came first, the unmistakable screech of brakes fighting the ice. Tires skidded. A black Bentley spun slightly, sliding directly toward her stand. Her breath caught. The car slammed into the corner of her cart, sending glass and flowers into the street like confetti tossed by some cruel hand. Chloe stumbled backward, heart racing, as her life, every dollar she had poured into this tiny business, lay broken at her feet. The Bentley door opened with a mechanical hiss, as if nothing tragic had just occurred. And out stepped Maxwell Sterling. For a moment, their worlds collided like two completely different languages forced into the same conversation. Maxwell took in the scene with a detached calmness. His tailored black coat swept in the wind as if he belonged in a movie about untouchable royalty. Chloe's hands trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp. He spoke first. "Are you hurt?" His voice was calm, controlled. She shook her head. "No thanks to you." He stepped closer, surveying the destroyed cart like it was an accounting problem. My office will handle full compensation. Submit an invoice. Chloe's mouth fell open, then curved into something cold. An invoice, she repeated bitterly. Maxwell furrowed his brow slightly as if puzzled by her reaction. You crushed my entire business. You think a check fixes this? The air around them thickened as pedestrians gathered. Whispers traveled fast. That's Maxwell Sterling, the billionaire. He's the one who owns Sterling Enterprises. Maxwell heard it all, but his eyes stayed locked on Chloe's. Your damages will be fully covered, he repeated, colder now. There's no need for theatrics. Chloe's voice cracked under the pressure, but her words sliced clean. You think money fixes everything, don't you? His jaw tightened. Jennifer nervously whispered from behind him, Sir, perhaps we should. He raised a hand, silencing her. The truth was, nobody had spoken to him like this in years, probably not since his mother passed, the only person who ever dared to confront him. Everyone else, the board, the investors, the entire world, bent around his name. But here was this young woman, standing in the cold, tears burning in her eyes, refusing to bow. It stirred something in him, something he couldn't quite name. Chloe's fingers clenched into fists as the cold bit her fingertips. The weight of everything threatened to collapse her right there. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Maxwell finally spoke again, softer this time. What's your name? Why do you care? Because, he said, his voice lower, you're the first person in a long time who hasn't. There was no sarcasm, no arrogance, just a strange, quiet honesty that caught Chloe off guard. She swallowed. Chloe Ramirez. Maxwell nodded as if committing it to memory. Jennifer stepped closer again. Sir, the board meeting. But Maxwell wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulling out a sleek black card. Take it. Use whatever you need to rebuild. Chloe stared at the card like it was a viper. No, she said softly, her voice thick. Keep it. Maxwell's eyes narrowed, studying her, as if she were an entirely new equation he couldn't solve. And for the first time in years, Maxwell Sterling didn't know what to say. That night, long after Chloe swept up the shattered glass alone and long after Maxwell returned to his skyscraper penthouse, both lay awake in separate worlds, thinking of the moment where everything broke. Or maybe where something began. He could buy anything except her forgiveness. But fate wasn't done with him yet. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Return. 3 days passed. 3 long, sleepless days where Chloe rebuilt her cart from scratch. The little savings she had set aside for Nathan's next hospital visit went into replacing jars, buckets, and fresh blooms. The weather was unforgiving, the city was indifferent. But Chloe, she was stubborn. Every night she sat by her brother's bedside, pretending everything was fine, telling him stories about brave people who never gave up. She didn't tell him that their landlord had slipped another overdue notice under the door, or that her hands trembled when she counted how little she had left, or that she couldn't stop replaying the moment, him, over and over in her head. Meanwhile, on the 47th floor of the Sterling Tower, Maxwell was fighting a very different battle. Sir, your father expects your attendance at the investors' dinner this Friday, Jennifer said, scanning the tablet. And the Hong Kong merger is on hold until you approve the revised terms. Maxwell rubbed his temples, his mind elsewhere. For the past 3 nights, he hadn't been able to stop thinking about Chloe Ramirez. It was her anger, her refusal, her eyes, the way she looked at him like he was just another problem to solve, not someone to fear. Maxwell Sterling had stood in rooms full of world leaders, billionaires, and royalty. None had ever made his chest tighten the way she did. That's why he was standing there now, on the opposite corner of the busy Chicago street, hiding behind a hot dog stand, wearing cheap sunglasses and an ill-fitting baseball cap he had bought from a tourist shop that morning. Jennifer stood beside him, confused. Sir, what exactly are we doing? Maxwell didn't answer. His eyes were locked on her. There she was, Chloe Ramirez, back at her little cart, carefully arranging pink peonies, laughing softly with an elderly couple buying a bouquet. She was radiant, Ordinary. Untouchable. Jennifer lowered her voice. You have a board meeting in 40 minutes. Cancelled. Sorry. I said cancelled. Jennifer blinked, unsure whether to call security or a therapist. But she knew better than to argue when he used that tone. Maxwell took a deep breath, adjusting his ridiculous disguise. This was madness. What was he doing here? He didn't approach people. People approached him. But something inside him, something deeper than logic or pride, pushed him forward. He crossed the street. The world slowed. The city noise faded into a soft hum as he stepped closer to her. Chloe didn't recognize him at first. He wore a simple gray hoodie, cheap jeans, and those hideous sunglasses. But as he stood there awkwardly in front of her cart, she glanced up. Their eyes met. Her breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she narrowed her eyes. Seriously? She whispered, folding her arms. Stalking me now? Maxwell flinched, completely thrown. I was just passing by. In this neighborhood? She scoffed. Wearing that? He tugged at the brim of his cap, suddenly aware of how absurd he looked. I wanted to check on you. She stared at him like he had grown two heads. Check on me? Her voice was sharp, defensive. Why? You destroy people's businesses and then drop by for a friendly chat days later? I didn't come here to upset you. Then why are you here, Mr. Sterling? He exhaled. Call me Matt. Matt, she repeated, raising an eyebrow. He nodded awkwardly, short for Matthew. She shook her head, laughing softly, but there was no humor in it. Do you honestly think I don't know who you are? Your face is on half the magazines in every checkout line. Maxwell's stomach twisted. He hadn't planned for this part. But then, something in Chloe's voice shifted. The sarcasm softened, and her eyes searched his face. But I do want to know why someone like you is here, really. The question hung heavy between them. Maxwell swallowed. His voice came lower this time, more vulnerable than he intended. Because for the first time in years, I met someone who didn't see my name first. Silence. The city moved around them, cars honking, people rushing, conversations buzzing. But between them, everything stilled. Chloe's chest tightened. She hadn't expected that answer. You still think you can fix things, don't you? She said softly. You think showing up here, pretending to be normal, will make this right? No, he whispered. Nothing can make it right. But maybe I can learn how to be something else. Something else? Someone better. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Really looked at him. There was no smug billionaire here now. No powerful CEO. Just a man standing awkwardly in front of a small flower stand. And strangely, that made her angrier than any check ever could. Chloe's voice trembled. You want to understand my world, she said, eyes narrowing. Fine. She hated most. She reached for her megaphone, the bright pink plastic one she always kept near the cart. She clicked it on, her voice echoing down the busy sidewalk. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today. The mighty Maxwell Sterling, or should I say Matt, is here, selling flowers to pay his rent. Pedestrians turned. Some laughed. Some pulled out their phones. Maxwell flushed a sensation entirely foreign to him. Chloe leaned closer, lowering the megaphone. Welcome to my world, Mr. Sterling. No boardrooms, no chauffeurs, no assistants. Just cold wind, long hours, and people who only stop if they think you're worth seeing. Maxwell met her gaze, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Then teach me, he said quietly, if you'll let me. A man who had everything, and a woman who had nothing but her pride. And yet, somehow, their worlds had only just begun to collide. The flower lessons. The next morning, Maxwell Sterling stood exactly where he said he would, in front of Chloe's flower cart. No sunglasses this time, no cap, no disguise, just him. Awkward, but present. The early sun hadn't yet melted the frost on the sidewalk. His breath came out in little clouds as he waited. Chloe approached, arms crossed, scanning him from head to toe. You actually showed up. Maxwell offered a small, almost sheepish smile. I said I would. You realize you can't just, she gestured around them, play poor for a day and think you'll get it. I'm not playing, he said quietly. I'm here to learn. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city pulsed around them, horns blaring, buses roaring by, people shuffling past without noticing either of them. Finally, Chloe exhaled. All right then, Matt. She bit back a sarcastic grin. Let's see what you've got. She handed him a pair of gloves that were slightly too small for his long fingers. First rule of survival out here, cold hands are your enemy. Second rule, smile at customers even when you want to scream. Maxwell pulled the gloves on awkwardly, wincing as the seams pinched. Third rule, she continued, stepping behind the cart, flowers aren't products, they're stories. He blinked. Stories? People don't buy flowers because they need them, they buy them to feel something. Her eyes flickered. To apologize, to celebrate, to heal. Every bouquet means something. Maxwell was quiet, processing that. In his world, everything was transactions, logic, profit margins. This, emotion, was foreign. Chloe handed him a bundle of tulips and eucalyptus stems. Your first lesson, arrangement. He fumbled as the stems slipped between his fingers, dropping 2 to the pavement. You're hopeless, she sighed with a teasing grin, kneeling to pick them up. Maxwell knelt too, reaching for the fallen flowers at the same time. For a brief second, their hands brushed. Warm skin against cold fingertips. Both froze. Neither spoke, but they both felt the spark, soft and unexpected. Chloe cleared her throat and stood, shoving the moment aside. Here. She gently guided his hands. You want balance, color, height. Don't force it. Let the flowers guide you. Maxwell followed her lead, his hands moving slower now, more careful. His brow furrowed as he concentrated. Her voice softened. You're tense. Relax. He glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his lips. I don't relax easily. Yeah, I figured. They worked in silence for a while, slowly building a small arrangement together. The cold air bit at their faces, but somehow, neither of them noticed anymore. The first customer of the morning approached, a young man nervously clutching his phone. Hi, the man stammered, eyeing the bouquets. Do you have something for an anniversary? I kind of forgot. Chloe leaned toward Maxwell, whispering, Your turn. Maxwell stiffened. Me? Sell it. Go on. The man looked expectantly between them. Maxwell took a deep breath, heart pounding in his chest. This was entirely different from corporate negotiations. Well, Maxwell began carefully, his voice steady but unsure. I would recommend these. He gestured to the bouquet they had just finished. Soft pink tulips, they symbolize affection. Eucalyptus for protection. A little touch of wildflower for uniqueness. The young man blinked, surprised. That sounds perfect. He handed over the cash, smiling with relief. Thanks, man. As the customer walked away, Chloe blinked in surprise. Not bad, she admitted. Maxwell looked genuinely proud for a moment. See? Not completely hopeless. For the next hour, Maxwell helped her arrange, sell, and greet customers. Some glanced at him with curiosity. This tall, sharply dressed man, awkwardly learning how to wrap stems in brown paper? But Chloe noticed something else. He didn't flinch. He wasn't performing. He was actually trying. As the morning crowd thinned, Chloe handed him a cup of cheap coffee from the corner cart. Here, welcome to the real world. Maxwell sipped, grimacing. It tastes like regret. Chloe laughed, a soft, genuine sound that caught him off guard. He stared at her for a moment, something warm building in his chest. Not desire, not lust, something gentler, something more dangerous. Admiration. Why flowers? He asked quietly. She paused, eyes distant. Because they don't last. Maxwell tilted his head. That's why? Chloe nodded. They remind people that beautiful things are temporary. You have to appreciate them while you can. Maxwell fell silent, letting her words settle. That's oddly profound. She smiled faintly, looking away. You'd be surprised how much you learn when life falls apart. Maxwell wanted to ask about her struggles, about her brother, about the shadows behind her bright eyes. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he simply said, "I'd like to come back tomorrow, if you'll let me." Chloe studied him carefully, unsure whether to push him away or let him stay. Finally, she whispered, "All right, Matt, tomorrow." And for the first time in years, Maxwell Sterling walked away from something he couldn't control and felt strangely at peace. She was teaching him how to feel. He was learning how to stay. Chapter 4. The Truth Unfolds. 2 weeks. That's how long Maxwell Sterling, or Math, as Chloe still called him, kept returning to her little flower stand. Every morning, like clockwork, he showed up, not as a billionaire, but as her clumsy assistant. They arranged bouquets, they sold roses to nervous first dates, they laughed at tourists bargaining over tulips. He spilled water, she teased him, and slowly, something delicate started blooming between them. Something neither dared to name yet. But Chloe was not naive. Each night, lying awake in her tiny apartment while Nathan slept peacefully in the next room, doubt whispered in her ears. Why would a man like him be here? Why would someone who clearly doesn't belong in this world choose to stay? There were small clues, the way he carried himself, his vocabulary, how he seemed to instinctively calculate numbers when they counted the day's sales, how his watch glinted under his sleeve even though he tried to hide it. And then there were the people. The man in a dark car who sometimes parked across the street, pretending to read a newspaper but clearly watching. The woman with the clipboard, Jennifer she had overheard once, who occasionally appeared near the end of the day, eyes tracking Maxwell's every move. The cracks in the disguise were spreading. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light across the Chicago skyline, Chloe decided she couldn't carry the question any longer. She waited until the last customer left. The street grew quiet, and the city's evening hum wrapped around them. Maxwell was wiping down the wooden counter with the same clumsy determination as always. "Matt?" she called softly. He looked up, surprised by her serious tone. "We need to talk." He straightened, sensing the shift instantly. "Of course." Chloe stepped out from behind the cart, folding her arms tightly to her chest. "I've let you into my world, into my life. You've met my brother, you've spent weeks here. But there's something you haven't shared." Maxwell swallowed, his throat tightening. He knew this moment was coming. And yet, standing here, he wasn't ready. Chloe's voice trembled but stayed strong. "Who are you, really?" Maxwell opened his mouth, closed it again. He could hear his father's voice in his head, "Never show weakness." But this wasn't the boardroom. This was her. And he didn't want to lie to her anymore. "My name is Maxwell Sterling," he finally said, the words low and heavy. The wind seemed to stop. Chloe froze, her breath catching. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "The Maxwell Sterling?" she whispered. He nodded once, eyes locked on hers. The words crashed into her like a wave. Her knees weakened, but she held her ground. "You've been lying to me this entire time," she said, barely above a whisper. "At first, yes," he admitted. "But not because I wanted to deceive you." "Then why?" The pain in her voice was sharp, raw. "Why would a billionaire pretend to be poor, to humiliate me? Some sick game to feel better about yourself?" Maxwell flinched, his voice breaking slightly. "No. God, no. Chloe, you're the first person who didn't see me as a deal, or a name. You saw me. Not my empire, not my father's shadow. Me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to lose that." Chloe took a shaky breath. The world around her blurred for a moment. The long nights. The moments of laughter. The way he stumbled through arranging sunflowers. How he'd awkwardly carried buckets of water in the cold. Had it all been real? Her stomach twisted. "Was anything true?" she asked softly, tears threatening to fall. Maxwell stepped forward, desperation trembling in his voice. "Everything, Chloe, everything I told you. How I felt when I was here. How you made me feel. All of that was real. But you chose to lie." "I chose to escape," he whispered. "To be someone different for once. And then I met you, and I didn't know how to stop. Silence swallowed them whole. The cars passed, the wind whispered between them, but Chloe felt completely alone, even as he stood only feet away. She shook her head, her voice barely audible now. You should go. Maxwell's chest tightened. Please, Chloe. You should go, she repeated, firmer this time. His shoulders sagged as he realized there was nothing more to say. Maxwell took a step back, his breath shallow. And for the first time in years, the man who had never been denied anything finally turned and walked away, powerless. That night, Chloe stood alone beside her cart. The city lights blurred through the tears she refused to wipe. The man she thought she was starting to trust was just another person who played with people like her. Rich, powerful, protected. He was nothing to him but a passing rebellion against his cold corporate world. Or was she? Inside his penthouse that night, Maxwell stood in front of the enormous glass windows, looking down at the city that had once made him feel invincible. But tonight, he felt small. For the first time in his life, money couldn't fix this. Power couldn't buy her trust. And as he stared into the endless skyline, one thought echoed louder than all the boardrooms and empires combined. He had fallen in love, and now he had lost her. Some betrayals aren't about what's said, but what was never told. And sometimes, even love is not enough, until you're willing to risk everything to prove it. Chapter 5. The Proposal of Power. 3 days. 3 painfully long days had passed since Maxwell walked away from Chloe's flower cart. The city moved on, like it always does, but Maxwell didn't. Every morning, he still found himself looking out his penthouse window toward the little park on 12th Street, where her cart usually sat. And every morning the ache inside him grew heavier. He couldn't focus. Meetings blurred into meaningless background noise. His assistant Jennifer watched silently, worried. Finally, on the 4th day, Jennifer spoke as she entered his office. "Sir," she said gently, "you can't keep sitting here." Maxwell exhaled, his voice distant. "I lied to her, Jennifer. I broke the only honest connection I've had in years." Jennifer stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then fix it." Maxwell blinked, surprised by her bluntness. "Fix it?" Jennifer nodded. "You've spent your entire career solving impossible problems. Don't tell me you're giving up on the only one that actually matters." That night, Maxwell made a decision, but not with words, with action. The next morning, Chloe returned to her flower stand for the first time since their confrontation. She told herself it was for Nathan, for the bills, for survival. But deep down, she knew it was also because standing there was the only place she still felt like herself. She sat up quietly, trying to keep her head down, her breath clouding in the crisp air. Then she noticed something odd. Across the street, parked at the curb, was a delivery truck. A man in a suit stepped out carrying a large box. He crossed over to her cart and stopped, clearing his throat nervously. "Ms. Ramirez?" he asked. Chloe frowned, instantly guarded. "Who's asking?" "I was instructed to deliver this to you." He handed her a sealed envelope and a large box, then walked away without another word. Chloe stared at the envelope for a moment before opening it. Inside was a handwritten note, elegant, neat, and unmistakably his. "Chloe, you once told me that flowers tell stories. This is not an apology. This is my first attempt to write one with you. If you choose to open the box, you'll understand." Maxwell. Her heart pounded as she carefully opened the box. Inside were dozens of delicate custom glass vases, each one engraved with her name and logo, Ramirez Blooms, handcrafted flowers. Beneath them was a small portfolio. She opened it slowly. Inside were full design mock-ups, carefully printed contracts, and official documents for a proposed partnership. Proposal: exclusive floral design partnership, Sterling Enterprises Hotels and Properties. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a legitimate offer, a business proposal that could transform her small cart into a luxury floral supplier across all of Sterling's properties. Full creative control. No corporate branding, no ownership stakes. She would remain fully independent. Her own business finally stabilized. A second note was tucked inside. I don't want to buy your forgiveness. I want to invest in your gift. The world needs to see what I see when I watch you work. But only if you choose to. Chloe's hands shook. Her mind spun between anger, caution, and a growing warmth she was terrified to name. Was this genuine, or was this just another way for him to control her world? That afternoon, as the sun lowered behind the towers, Maxwell appeared. No sunglasses, no disguise, no pretense. Just him, standing quietly in front of her cart. Chloe didn't speak right away. Neither did he. The tension hung between them like a thread threatening to snap. Finally, Chloe broke the silence. "You think throwing money at me will fix everything?" she said softly, her voice steady but sharp. Maxwell shook his head. His voice trembled slightly, but he held her gaze. "No. Then what is this?" she asked, holding up the proposal folder. "It's not a transaction," he whispered. "It's a chance. For you, for your brother, for your future, and for you," she challenged. Maxwell paused, taking a breath. "For me," his voice cracked, lower now. "It's a chance to finally do something with my power that matters." Chloe's eyes glistened, but her walls stayed up. "Why me?" Maxwell stepped closer, his voice raw. "Because you taught me how to feel again. You showed me what real life looks like outside glass towers and boardrooms. And when you looked at me, you didn't see a billionaire. You saw a man. And for the first time in my life, I wanted to be that man." Silence again. But this time it was softer. Less like distance. More like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Chloe swallowed, her voice trembling. "This changes everything." Maxwell nodded. "Only if you want it to." Her guard cracked just slightly. "And if I say no, then I'll keep showing up," he said, gently, "until you believe me." For the first time in weeks, Chloe allowed herself to truly meet his eyes. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the fear and betrayal, something whispered. Maybe. He didn't offer her riches. He offered her something far rarer, trust. But trust must still be earned. Chapter 6. The family strikes back. For a few brief weeks, they found something that almost felt like peace. Maxwell kept coming back. Not as the billionaire, not as the CEO. Just as Maxwell. He wrapped bouquets alongside Chloe, helped her carry heavy water buckets, listened as she explained which flowers needed sunlight and which ones feared the wind. Nathan adored him. Chloe's younger brother, shy at first, had quickly latched onto Maxwell's calm presence. They played chess in the evenings, sharing quiet conversations that made Chloe secretly smile. Slowly, gently, trust was growing again, until the outside world came crashing back in. It started with a simple phone call. Jennifer's voice was tense on the other end of the line. "Sir, your father knows." Maxwell closed his eyes, exhaling. He'd been expecting this. When did he find out? This morning, one of the board members saw the partnership contracts you filed for Ramirez Blooms. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, staring out over the city skyline. "And?" "He's furious, sir. He's on his way here, and he's not alone." 2 hours later, the Sterling Tower's private conference room grew cold with tension. Victor Sterling, Maxwell's father, stood at the head of the table, flanked by several stone-faced board members. Victor's voice was sharp, controlled, dangerous. "I've allowed you a great deal of freedom, Maxwell, but this..." He slapped the printed partnership contract onto the table. "This is not freedom. This is recklessness." Maxwell sat still, refusing to look away. "It's my division." Victor's lip curled. "Your decision to tie this company's reputation to a street vendor? Her name is Chloe. That's irrelevant." "No," Maxwell snapped, voice rising. "It's..." The board members exchanged glances but stayed silent. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You're sacrificing decades of strategic positioning for a whim. For some charity project wrapped in personal attachment." Maxwell's jaw clenched. "It's not charity, it's business. Smart business. She has talent you can't manufacture in a boardroom. She connects with people in a way our brand has lost." Victor's voice dropped low. And you've connected, haven't you? Maxwell's fists tightened beneath the table. This has nothing to do with— Don't insult me, son. Victor cut him off coldly. You've compromised this company before, with that disaster in Hong Kong. And now you bring this girl into our family business? Into our name? Maxwell stood. Enough. Victor's eyes darkened. Do you truly think she belongs in our world? You're blind, Maxwell. The moment this arrangement fails, she'll take everything you've built and walk away. Maxwell's voice trembled now, not from fear, but fury. She doesn't want my money. She never did. She walked away when she found out who I was. Victor leaned in, voice like ice. They all walk away eventually, Max. Or worse, they stay long enough to bleed you dry. Silence. Maxwell stared at his father. For years, Victor had controlled him, directed every major choice, shaped his future like it was another acquisition. But not this time. You taught me how to protect the company, Maxwell said softly. But you never taught me how to live. Victor blinked, thrown for the first time. Maxwell continued, voice steadier. I won't lose her because of you. Victor's nostrils flared. You're risking the empire for this woman. Maxwell's lips curved into something close to a smile. No, father, I'm building something bigger than your empire. Hours later, Maxwell found Chloe at her stand. She was organizing bouquets, pretending not to notice him as he approached. You've been quiet today, he said gently. Chloe glanced up, cautious. You know why? He nodded. They came after us. They always do, she whispered. Rich men don't just get to choose women like me. The world doesn't work that way. Maxwell took a step closer. Then we change the world. Chloe's eyes filled, but her voice was tired. You think you can fight your father, your board, your entire legacy? For me? Maxwell didn't hesitate. For you, for us. Then Chloe said something he didn't expect. Maxwell, I'm scared. He reached for her hands, his voice a whisper. So am I. But you've been fighting your whole life. Let me fight this one. Chloe stared at him, searching his face, his words, his sincerity. And slowly, she nodded. All right, she whispered. But if we do this, we do it together. When the world draws lines between power and love, only those who risk everything can cross them. Chapter 7. The Betrayal. For a few precious weeks after Maxwell stood up to his father, everything seemed possible. Chloe's small flower stand began supplying several Sterling-owned boutique hotels across Chicago. Not in her wildest dreams had she imagined her little handwritten tags sitting inside marble lobbies and five-star lounges. Nathan was stable, the hospital bills were no longer terrifying. Even the landlord smiled when Chloe handed him rent early for the first time in months. And Maxwell kept showing up. Not as her savior, not as a CEO, just as her partner. But the higher you climb, the further you can fall. One morning, Jennifer stormed into Maxwell's office, her face pale, holding a tablet. Sir, you need to see this. Maxwell turned, instantly alert. What happened? Jennifer swallowed, dread in her voice. Crimson Luxury released a statement this morning, accusing you of corporate favoritism, conflict of interest, and theft of intellectual property. Maxwell's stomach dropped. On the screen were side-by-side photos. Chloe's flower designs, and nearly identical arrangements now being advertised by Crimson as their upcoming exclusive collection. They're accusing Ramiro's Blooms of stealing their designs, Jennifer whispered. Maxwell's jaw clenched. That's impossible. These designs are hers, original, handmade. Jennifer lowered her voice. And there's more. She scrolled to leaked emails, forged correspondences that suggested Maxwell had funneled internal Sterling designs to Chloe as a personal favor. They're trying to make this look like you gave her confidential materials to elevate her business. Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face. And the press? He asked. Jennifer hesitated. Percolating everywhere. At the same time, across town, Chloe's world was collapsing. She stood frozen in front of her apartment, Nathan watching her nervously from the doorway. Her phone buzzed non-stop with calls from journalists, bloggers, tabloids, all demanding statements, twisting headlines. Street vendor or corporate puppet. Sterling CEO's girlfriend accused of corporate espionage. Her throat tightened. The neighbors whispered. People stared when she walked to the grocery store. Her quiet little world had become a public circus. When Maxwell arrived at her apartment that evening, Chloe was already waiting at the curb. Her arms were crossed, her face was tight. Maxwell stepped out of his car, heart pounding. "Chloe, don't." She cut him off, her voice raw. "I didn't leak anything," Maxwell said softly. "I swear to you." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But someone did. Someone inside your world. And now, I'm the target. I will find out who's behind this," Maxwell promised. Chloe's voice trembled. "That won't fix what's already broken." Silence. They stood there under the dim street lamp, two people pulled from different worlds, the gap between them growing again. Finally, Chloe whispered, "Maybe your father was right." Maxwell flinched. "No." She swallowed hard. "Maybe I don't belong in your world, Max. You belong with me." Her eyes dropped to the sidewalk. "But look what happens when I try." That was when she said the words he feared most. "I need space." Maxwell's breath hitched. "I need to breathe," she whispered. "Before your world drowns me." And just like that, she turned and walked inside. The door clicked shut behind her, and Maxwell Sterling, who had faced billion-dollar losses, legal wars, global mergers, stood powerless, staring at that door like a man who had just lost the only thing that mattered. He fought for her, but sometimes even love cannot outrun the storm, the fight for truth. 2 days. That's how long it had been since Chloe closed the door on him. Maxwell barely slept, barely ate. His world, once cold, precise, untouchable, now felt like it was made of shattered glass beneath his feet. But one thing was clear. Someone had done this, and he was going to find them. Jennifer sat across from him in his office, her tone sharper than usual. "We know Crimson Luxury is involved, but this kind of coordinated leak? They had inside help." Maxwell rubbed his temples. "Someone inside Sterling?" Jennifer nodded. "It's more." She slid a file across the table. Security logs. 3 unauthorized accesses to our design archives right before Crimson's announcement. All traced back to the executive server. Maxwell's jaw clenched. "Which executive?" Jennifer hesitated, then whispered, "Robert Gaines." Robert Gaines, Senior VP. Loyal to Victor Sterling. A man Maxwell never fully trusted, but never had proof to confront. Until now. Later that night, Maxwell stood in the Sterling Tower's private conference room, facing Robert, who remained composed, like a man who believed he was untouchable. "You leaked the designs," Maxwell said flatly. Robert smiled thinly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Maxwell's voice was ice. "You sold the files to Crimson. You forged the emails to frame Chloe. You weaponized my relationship to weaken my position." Robert's smile never wavered. "Maxwell, come now. You've allowed personal feelings to compromise your judgment. Your father agrees. The board agrees. They won't after the police see these." Maxwell dropped a flash drive onto the table. Full access logs, transaction records, communications between Robert and Crimson. For the first time, Robert's face broke. "You won't go public," he sneered. "It would destroy Sterling's reputation." Maxwell's voice dropped low. "Sterling Enterprises will survive, but you're done." By morning, Robert Gaines was arrested. News outlets exploded with the real story, clearing Chloe's name and exposing Crimson's role in corporate espionage. The very people who whispered behind Chloe's back were now apologizing on national television. But Maxwell still hadn't heard from Chloe. 3 days later, Jennifer found him standing alone in the rooftop garden. "Sir," she said gently, "she knows." Maxwell turned. "Knows what?" "That you cleared her name. She's seen the news." Maxwell swallowed, his chest tight. "And?" Jennifer smiled softly. "She's downstairs." Maxwell turned to find Chloe standing by the elevator. For a moment, neither moved. Then slowly, she stepped toward him. Her voice was soft, shaky. "You did it." Maxwell's voice cracked. "You deserve the truth. And your name back." Tears welled in her eyes. "You could have protected the company by walking away from me. You didn't." He shook his head. "Because none of it means anything without you." Silence. Then Chloe whispered, "I was scared, Max." "So was I." Her voice broke. "And now?" Maxwell stepped closer, barely inches between them now. "Now, I'm still scared. But I'm not running." Chloe's lips trembled. "I don't want to run either." And finally, she fell into his arms. For the first time, truly, together. No secrets. No walls. No pretending. The truth can break you, but it can also set you free. Chapter 9. The Rooftop Confession. The Chicago sky was painted with soft streaks of pink and gold as the sun dipped beyond the horizon. The wind whispered gently, not harsh like before, as if even the city had grown quiet for what was about to happen. Maxwell led Chloe onto the private rooftop garden of Sterling Tower, the very same place where months ago he'd stood, alone, drowning in his father's shadow. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, he stood with her. The rooftop was transformed. Dozens of soft white lights hung above them like stars. Petals, Chloe's flowers, were arranged in glass vases around the terrace. Roses, peonies, wildflowers. Her touch was everywhere. Chloe stopped at the center, breathless. "Max, what is this?" Maxwell's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "My world finally looks a little like yours." She turned, facing him fully now. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't want you to change everything for me," she whispered. "I didn't," Maxwell replied. "I changed for myself. You just showed me how." Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was full, heavy with everything unsaid, everything felt. Maxwell took a breath. "I've spent my whole life building walls," he said quietly. "Walls made of power, control, money, armor to protect me from ever being hurt." He paused, voice tightening. "But those same walls kept everyone out." He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly as he took hers. "And then you walked right through them, Chloe." Her breath caught. "You challenged me. You didn't care about my last name. You didn't flinch when I lied. You made me see the man I could be, not the man I was raised to become." Chloe's tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. Maxwell's voice cracked. "For the first time, I want to build something that isn't measured in profits or shares. I want to build a life with you." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small box. But inside wasn't a diamond. It was a ring made of intertwined metals, rose gold and silver, delicately wrapped like vines, with a single small opal at the center that shimmered in different colors under the lights. Just like her. Two worlds. One story. Maxwell's voice broke into a whisper. "Will you marry me?" Chloe stared down at the ring, then up at him. For so long she had lived on the edge of fear, of never belonging, of being crushed by the weight of people like him. But here he was, not above her. Beside her, she whispered through tears. "Yeah." Maxwell exhaled a shaky breath, almost like he couldn't believe it. With trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger. And there, under the Chicago sky, they held each other. No longer CEO and street vendor. No longer billionaire and nobody. Just Maxwell and Chloe. Two people who had fought through the impossible and chose each other. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can give isn't wealth. It's his heart, the proposal among flowers. 6 months later, spring had returned to Chicago. The city's cold edges softened, and even the hard streets felt lighter under the warmth of the new season. And today, at the corner of 12th Street, the same street where it all began, something very different was happening. Chloe's flower stand was still there, but it had grown. Now expanded, freshly painted, with polished displays, little chalkboard signs handwritten with Chloe's looping script. Today's blooms: hope, courage, and wild joy. Nathan, healthier now, was carefully arranging sunflowers nearby, beaming with pride. Jennifer stood not far off, smiling softly as she watched the scene. Even she, the fiercely guarded assistant who once lived by board meetings and cold efficiency, couldn't deny the warmth in her chest. The world had changed, and so had Maxwell. Then he arrived. Not in his usual luxury car, not in a tailored designer suit, but in simple rolled sleeves, khaki pants, and a linen shirt. Hair slightly wind-tousled, a man far from the billionaire the world once feared. Maxwell Sterling was no longer running a life designed for him. He was living the one he chose. Chloe looked up and smiled as he approached. "You're late," she teased. Maxwell grinned. "Nathan made me stop for donuts." Nathan raised his hands. "Hey, priorities." They laughed. The easy kind of laughter only people who'd weathered storms together can share. After a few quiet moments, Maxwell gently reached for Chloe's hand. Her breath caught, something flickering behind his eyes. "Nathan, Jen. Would you give us a moment?" They nodded, stepping back, giving them space. Maxwell took a slow breath. "This corner," he whispered, "was where I almost lost everything, and where I found everything I never knew I needed." Chloe's eyes glistened, her chest tightening. "You already proposed once, Max," she said softly, her smile trembling. Maxwell smiled. "I know, but that was a proposal to start our life." He stepped back slightly, revealing something behind him. A new wooden sign, hand-carved, fixed onto the front of the cart. "Remeyers and Sterling Blooms, where two worlds grow together." Chloe's breath hitched, her hand covering her mouth. Maxwell continued, voice breaking. "This isn't just your business anymore. This is ours. Not my company, not my legacy. Ours." He dropped to one knee, right there on the sidewalk, among the flowers they built together. "You taught me how to love, how to see, how to create something with my own hands." He smiled, his voice trembling. "Chloe Ramirez, will you marry me? Not as a man trying to fix your life, but as a man who can't imagine his without you." Tears spilled freely now. Chloe whispered through the lump in her throat. "Yes, Max, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring, the same intertwined rose gold and silver piece, onto her finger once more. But this time it was different. This time the whole city seemed to breathe with them. A small crowd of pedestrians applauded, strangers smiling at a love story unfolding in real time. Jennifer clapped softly. Nathan let out a loud cheer. Even the nearby street musicians struck up a quiet, romantic tune, as if on cue. Chloe leaned in and whispered through tears, "Max, I still sell flowers on the street." Maxwell chuckled softly. "And I still carry your buckets." They laughed because it was never about escaping where they came from. It was about choosing where they belonged. Together, as they kissed beneath the soft spring breeze, the camera would pull up into the sky. The busy streets, the flower stand, the towering buildings. Two tiny figures standing at the center of two worlds that no longer opposed one another. In the end, love wasn't about breaking through two different worlds. It was about building one together. Scene fades softly as the final kiss lingers under the Chicago sky. The music lowers. The wind hums. The screen dims into soft, almost dreamlike visuals, replaying brief flashes. Chloe's hands arranging fresh bouquets. Maxwell awkwardly fumbling with flower stems. Nathan laughing with Maxwell over chess. The rooftop confession. And finally, the simple wooden sign, "Where two worlds grow together." Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about grand palaces or billion-dollar fortunes. They're about one moment, one choice, one person who dared to see past the walls we build to protect ourselves. Maxwell didn't save Chloe, and Chloe didn't rescue Maxwell. They simply found each other and chose love. If it were you, would you have trusted him after the lie? Would you have had the courage to stay? If this story touched you, the next one goes even deeper. I invite you to stay with us, because sometimes the most impossible love stories are the ones we carry long after the video ends. See you in the next one.